Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Authors on Mission podcast. Today, just close your eyes and picture this for a moment. You're watching a toddler struggle to reach a toy on a high shelf. Every instinct tells you to help immediately. But what if I told you that the most powerful thing you can do in that moment is sometimes absolutely nothing? Welcome to Authors on Mission podcast, where we dive deep into the minds that are reshaping how we think, learn, and grow. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host today, and we don't just interview successful authors, we uncover the revolutionary ideas that challenge everything we thought we knew. Today, we're joined by the wonderful Jeaneen Tang, a speech-language pathologist with over 20 years experience, who's turned conventional wisdom about child development completely upside down. Her book, Dumb and Sabotage, isn't changing how parents and educators approach language development, but it's also preventing countless children from needing speech therapy in the first place. Here's where it gets personal. Jeaneen has an incredible story to tell that has shaped her experience here. She's going to be talking all about that today. Spoiler alert, though, her story, the doctors were completely wrong, so we're exploring how intentionally playing dumb and strategically sabotaging our children's comfort zones might be the most loving thing we can do. So get ready to question everything you thought you knew about helping kids communicate, and get ready to jump into Play Dumb and Sabotage. Jeaneen, welcome to the Authors on Mission podcast.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Danielle. Thanks for having me today.
Of course, I'm very excited to dive in. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this to you before, but our audience here knows that I also do work with young children on the side of my freelance writing and ghostwriting and podcasting and all of that. I also work as a preschool teacher, so what we're talking about today is actually a little bit relevant to what I do on a daily basis also. So I think this is going to be a great conversation for us to dive into, and I think a lot of people, of course, are going to benefit from it too.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm excited to hear that you're a preschool teacher. We need more of them.
Yeah. It's something I've been doing on the side a little bit. I do enjoy what I do here. I'm kind of transitioning out of that world, but it is something I've been doing for many years. So, but the main thing here is what you've done is also reshape the whole industry. So that's incredible. I think it's important, though, that our audience learn a little bit more about you and what exactly led to this incredible book of strategies that you've released. You do have a story to tell here, one that's very personal about your son and everything that has happened to him in his life. So I'm wondering if you'd like to shed a little light there.
Absolutely. So let me start from the beginning, why I became a speech therapist, right? So I became a speech therapist in 2001, and it goes back to my need and want to help people. And, I went to school. I thought maybe I'd be a teacher or something, and thought about physical therapy, and when it came time to apply to graduate school, someone had mentioned speech therapy because I did performance speeches and I did some theater, and so they thought that the language part and the kind of performance part of it, right, because you want to communicate to people, could also be helpful. And so I did go down the path of a speech language pathologist, and I worked in the school system in Hawaii for 4 years. And then I got the acting bug and moved from Hawaii to Los Angeles. And thank goodness I still had my speech therapy degree, because I tried waitressing for almost a year and doing acting, and I was working like 60 or 70 hours a week. And I was like, why don't I get my license in California? I worked part-time as a speech therapist and could make the same amount of money working half the amount of hours. And so I did that. I did acting and speech therapy for a while. And then in 2012, I had my son, and I now became a mother. Because before, when you're just a speech therapist without children, you see the world in one kind of perspective, as a therapist, and you have your own feelings about how people should be raising their children or how they should be interacting with their children. And then once I had my son, I was then a mother, and I could understand better on how to work with people that had young children, because now I have a child of my own. And unfortunately, when he was 13 months old, he had a fall from our bed And it was just the box spring and the mattress, which was very, very short, right? It's 18 inches off the ground. But because the surface that he landed on was a wood laminate over a concrete, he hit his head in the most perfect way to give himself a traumatic brain injury, a large brain bleed, and he required an emergency craniotomy.
Wow.
A few days later, the swelling in his brain caused him to have a stroke. And so all of this damage to his brain was on the left side, which is where our language center is. And subsequently, he became paralyzed on his right side of his body. He wasn't able to use his right arm, his hand, his legs. And they thought that he might never walk or talk. That was their prognosis. They're like, he may never walk or talk. And for a mom, that's tragic to hear, right? It's heartbreaking. It's like the most devastating thing that a parent who has had this seemingly normal developing child up to that point, right? To now find out that this child's life is never going to be the same. Your life is never going to be the same. And you can either sit in that depression or, that dark hole of this is happening to us, or you can take action, right? So I was a speech therapist for many years up to that point, and I had been doing early intervention speech therapy since 2010. And I knew all of the processes to get early intervention therapy. So, we lived in the hospital for 3 months. And when we got home, I made sure we had speech therapy in place, occupational therapy in place, physical therapy, infant stimulation, so we could help our child become the best person he could be, right? And now he is almost 13. He's a teenager. And he is walking, he's talking, he's running, he's doing all kinds of things. He still doesn't use his right arm or hand functionally, but he knows it's there. He doesn't have as much neglect about it. He's trying to utilize it. He's trying to become as normal a child as he can. And without that early intervention therapy, we would not see the progress that we have with him today. And how that changed myself, as a speech therapist, it completely opened up this whole other perspective, because now I'm not only a therapist, but I'm also a mother of a special needs child. And it became kind of my superpower, because I could now see the world in 360 rather than in just one point of view. I have better rapport with parents. I have better empathy for these families, and I have a better rapport with these kids as well, because these kids who are struggling in whatever disability or deficit they have, my child has had that as well. And for these parents who have put up this wall of, what can you do for my child? I'm like, well, I can do a lot, because I've helped my child here, and I have the same level of understanding that you do about your child. And so it really breaks down that wall of defensiveness, and it helps to really build this partnership between parents and myself, so we can help their child become the best communicators that they can be.
Wow. Well, that is truly an incredible story. Such a whirlwind that you've been through. Just starting from, I know must have been so difficult and devastating in the beginning, but you've grew from that. And, here you are now, and you were able to advocate for your child and help him grow. And now you have Play Dumb and Sabotage, and you're helping others do the same. That's just remarkable. And I know that must have been a lot.
It was a lot, right? And I know that my son's going to need someone to be in his life to help take care of him for the rest of his life. Right. Because like a handful of years ago, he's developed seizures. And so, there's all these things that will prevent him from being truly independent. And in order to be the best parent that I can be for him, I need to have time for him, right? And I can't be working so many hours. I feel like I work all the time, but I really am working only part-time, but also building this other part of my business, right? So I have the Play Dumb and Sabotage book, because I wanted to also create a greater impact in the world. But how can you create a greater impact, but also be available for your child, right? So I couldn't duplicate myself, but I could duplicate what I know, put it in a book. I made it as conversational as possible so it can be accessible and digestible by anybody who picks it up, whether they're a first-time parent or they've, an early educator who has been teaching for a while, occupational therapist, physical therapist who's kind of new to the game and they need to know how to relate to these kids, or a speech therapist who wants to be able to teach it to their speech therapy assistants or also to their clients that they're working with as well.
Understood. You have a way of reaching multiple different audiences. Whoever it is that might need the book, you're able to write it in a way that's so accessible, like you mentioned before. I think that's something we should really touch upon as we talk about the writing strategies here. For example, what kind of methods did you use when making sure your language was engaging enough and accessible enough? Did you run it past maybe a beta reader, or did you kind of just test it based on what you know might be approachable for those audiences? What was your methodology for that?
I really took the writing process as a conversation with a person, right? It's as if I'm talking to a parent, as if I'm talking to a teacher who doesn't know all of the technical language that speech therapists learn via the textbook, right? So I wanted to be a conversation. And then we did have a number of readers read the book before it was published to kind of give me feedback. And a lot of the feedback was amazing because, they said, I could pick up your book and understand it. And, at the beginning of the book, there is terms, vocabulary terms that might be used. And, there's less than 15 terms. There's like 10 or 12 terms that you would have to know before reading the book, right? Just definitions. But other than that, everything was very digestible. I also wanted to make sure that it was interactive. So I made each chapter have an exercise at the end of it based on the information and strategies that were being covered. So that whoever was reading it and trying to understand it could apply it right away.
Right, understood. And that's a great way to go about it too. They know who their audience is, but to really speak to them, they need to employ strategies like you just mentioned to make sure that it is accessible and engaging. I know you also include a helpful term section, for example, with vocabulary, a way to help reduce the jargon. So that's another incredible thing that you did also. Was there a specific method you used to determine which terms should be in those sections and how to explain them?
I believe when I was thinking about the helpful terms, I was looking at the book as a whole and kind of picking apart the language that someone might have questions about, right? So if I was not a speech therapist, if I were to look at the book, what would I be not really sure about what that term would be? Trying to see it from another person's point of view who was not a speech therapist. Yeah.
Right, definitely. So it's really good that you have that, though, a way to really make it even more accessible to the audience. Now, kind of transitioning into more of the book itself, though, I would like to start off by saying also I do see the book right there in the background. I'm wondering if you'd like to display it for us to get a closer look at that.
Oh, absolutely.
How did you come up with the cover? Was this designed by yourself? Did you have a teammate kind of come in and help out a bit?
So I published my book through selfpublishing.com. Right.
Okay.
So they help like independent writers get their books published. And the content of the book is myself, but they help with the formatting because I didn't know what to do. Right. I didn't have anybody holding my hand except for them. They had a really great program that you could, enroll in. And they helped I found this graphic here, right, on the web. And they actually had it purchased in their in their inventory of pictures, and then they had people to help format the front of the book and everything, and they formatted the inside of the book and they helped with the back of the book, so it had some really key elements on what you can expect in the book and what the book can help you with.
That's wonderful. It's good to know that there's companies out there that do help along the process every step of the way. That's what we do here in Authors on Mission. Also, we offer guidance for publishing, cover design, book cover, just like you did as well. So there's many different resources out there, everybody, for that. With the site that you just mentioned, Jeanine, is one site. This is another one. So you got to kind of shop around, see what works best for you. But yours did come out very beautifully, so that's great to know. So transitioning a little bit more into some of the content. The title itself is pretty provocative, I'd say. Walk us through what you mean by playing dumb exactly. And I think it's really brilliant, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so Play Dumb and Sabotage. It does have a subtitle, right? The subtitle kind of explains it all. It says, mindfully under anticipating a child's needs and creating opportunities to practice language. And the play dumb part is we often, as parents, educators, we know what the child might want or need, right? So we over anticipate, especially first time parents, especially parents of special needs children. We want to make sure that the child is not uncomfortable, crying. We want to make sure that we're showing that we know what our child might need or want, because that's what we think we need to be as good parents, good caregivers, good educators, right? But actually, by doing too much for these kids, we're actually taking away their opportunity to interact naturally with their environment. We're actually creating this a detriment for them, because the children learn that I can have things done for me. I don't really necessarily have to work too hard to communicate. And also the play dumb is, sometimes kids love being smarter. Actually, kids always love being smarter than adults, right? So like, for instance, I had a little girl who had gone on a field trip to the farm, and her parents were like, "Oh, tell Miss Jeaneen how you went to the farm." And she goes, "No, no, I don't want to talk about it." And I go, "Oh, you went to the farm? Was there an elephant?" And she was like, "No, chickens." I was playing dumb, like, oh, so it helps build rapport. So when you ask absurd questions, oftentimes a child will be like, no, that's not correct. I'm going to correct you because that's not a smart answer. And then sabotage is all about practice, right? Sabotaging situations, like you said, having a toy in sight but out of reach. So the child might indicate that they want it. They might either sign or they might say, toy, please. I want ball, whatever that toy might be. And then, a perfect example of sabotage during snack time is, oftentimes parents will give a whole bowl of Cheerios, a whole bowl of goldfish, a whole, bowl of blueberries, whatever it is, rather than just giving a few. So when you think about practicing language, it's all about the interaction and the opportunities to practice it. So if you give the whole bowl of Cheerios, that interaction is done because you've already given the bowl, right? You've given everything that they might need or want. But if you give them a few pieces...
that's wonderful. And I know exactly what you mean. They're leaving them with those open-ended prompts to give them the time to do the cognitive, I guess you would say, like, evaluation behind it, getting to know the process themselves instead of just being provided with the answer. I can see what you mean by that. It helps to extend their language and vocabulary mentally, and as they're saying it out loud too. So it's almost like a dual benefit.
Yeah, so you can give a few Cheerios and have the rest of them in sight but out of reach, right? So that's a practice over and over again. Once they eat the Cheerios, they're going to want more, right? So they can work on indicating or asking, wherever, meeting that child where they are communicatively, and stretching their abilities too. There's a chapter in my book that says no child's ever died of crying, as far as we know. And it's not like, oh, neglect your child, right? Don't neglect your child. But if your child is oftentimes parents will give in when the child kind of whines or cries, because they know that that's what the child wants and they don't want their child to cry. But there is a fine line between ability and inability, right? You want to stretch that. If you have a child that is not able to crawl, you're not going to expect that child to run, right? If the child's not able to say one word, I'm not going to have the child say 3 words. But if the child can say some syllables, some babbling, some imitation of sounds, I might have them closely approximate 1 word, right? If they can say 1 word, I might have them closely approximate 2 words, which means like they're not going to be perfect, but at least they try, So you want to stretch their abilities, but not, you're not going to have them do something that they absolutely could not do at that moment.
Right, definitely. So I appreciate you going through all that with us. It makes a lot of sense. And I think it's something that, again, everybody really does need to know this because we all interact with young children, whether we are in the field of education, or we have children of our own, or even if we're just, maybe passing by in a grocery store aisle with a child. These are different ways that we can really stimulate language and cognitive ability. It's something your book really advocates for. And I think that's really important. But as we begin to transition a little bit more into the writing process itself, I'm curious to know, there any specific elements of the book that you found more challenging to write more than others? The reason I ask is because different authors might be trying to write books that are very similar, and this kind of guidance really does help them. I'm wondering what kind of techniques work best for you.
Yeah, for me, it really was just writing until I kind of had a block, and then I would kind of move to a different chapter and free write there. Like I know everybody has different processes, but that worked well for me. It's like I had the outline of the book because I knew the elements that I wanted in the book, the topics, and then if I got stuck on chapter one, I would move on to another chapter, whether it be chapter two or chapter 10 or whatever. And I would kind of go back and forth because I didn't want to get stuck in one area and then just stay there. I wanted to freely continue to flow my words, like jumping from one conversation to another in my mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good tip too. And because we don't want to burn ourselves out. We don't want to force ourselves to keep writing if we just don't have the ideas or the creativity at the moment. So jumping around to something else that's we're more inspired by, but that moment, really a good strategy right there. So, really amazing stuff here. So you have this book out and you've already done so much with it, but I'm wondering what else is on the horizon for you. Surely there's some other mission or perhaps another book or an endeavor that you've been working on.
Yeah, I'm currently working on building an online course, right? So I want to be able to have this accessible because not everybody wants to sit down and read a book, but they might take a course that's like an hour long or whatever, right? So I also want to make it accessible to different audiences. So I think the parents and caregivers would be the easiest to digest, right? The information. And the other audience would be for early educators, other therapists such as OTs, physical therapists, occupational therapists, behavioral therapists, even social workers and such. And then the third population or audience would be for speech therapists and speech therapy assistants, because they would be more in depth. And then that would kind of allow them to be able to then train their clients or other people on how to use the strategies in the book as well.
That's amazing. It's really great to know that you're taking this from the printed word into something even more. I always advocate for that. If you're an author, your ideas could expand beyond the pages, right? Just by creating courses like that, other people create social media content, others get on things like TED Talks. So whatever it takes to amplify a voice is something incredible. And you did say it very well, is that some people just don't have time to read a whole book. So the course, an amazing way to get your point across. Very cool. So where can people go to get in touch with you and to find out information about the course when it's ready, and perhaps to stay up to date with any other developments you might be working on?
They can go to my website. It's playdumbandsabotage.com. And from there, they can hit all my social media links as well as, watch previous podcasts I've been on as well. Watch for any events that I'm going to be planning. I will be putting links for the courses up there as well. And if they have any questions or want a consultation, they can reach out. Absolutely.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we're going to link to that in the description box of the podcast today. So if you're listening and you're interested in that consultation or want to just find out some more information, click on over. We'll have the link in the description box. So as we begin to sort of wrap up then, Jeanine, I'm wondering, what other tips might you have to offer the people listening today? Perhaps, if a parent's listening right now and they're worried that they've been over anticipating their child's needs, what's one small thing that they could try today right after the podcast ends?
Oh, definitely add in some pausing, right? So I think as parents, we see the child react to something or want something, and then all of a sudden we are reacting right away, right? So kind of assess and step back, observe, and take a pause and wait for the child to interact or see what they're going to do next. You can also slow down your language just a little bit it's almost like learning a foreign language, right? These children are hearing everything, but they might not be comprehending if we're speaking very quickly. But if we just slow our language down a little bit, then they can hear that each word is broken up into syllables, each sentence is broken up into words, and there's intonation, there's pauses, there's all these things that happen in our language. And when we model slower words, the child is then able to produce slower words, and sometimes it helps with their intelligibility. Because I had one little girl last week, she was saying daso, daso. I was like, oh, dinosaur. So we were breaking up the syllables, we were clapping them out, dinosaur. And that really helped her intelligibility, because for single sounds, she's intelligible. But when she starts putting multiple sounds together, then everything goes out the window. So.
Right, yeah. So there we go. We have to focus on those pauses, give the children a chance to think it through. And I do like the clapping method also. That's something I do in my class a lot too. It's part of the curriculum. So amazing tips right there. So yeah, everybody, if you are inspired today by Jeaneen's and her conversation and everything she's been teaching us today, you can learn more at the website in the description box, or by picking up your own copy of Play Dumb and Sabotage. I think it's something that everybody could really learn some insights from. So Jeaneen, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been a really fascinating conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. And to all of our listeners, just remember that every expert really was just a beginner. Every breakthrough started with somebody willing to change the status quo. Jeaneen Tang didn't just write a book about language development. What she has here is a movement that's preventing speech delays before they even start. So again, pick up your copy of Play Dumb and Sabotage wherever books are sold. Connect with Jeaneen at her website. This is Danielle Hutchinson with the Authors on Mission podcast, where we believe that the right book at the right time can change everything. So until the next episode, keep questioning, keep learning, and remember, sometimes the most powerful action is knowing when not to act. See you next time, everybody.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.